Hello everyone, this is just a quick little video tutorial about the competitive or hardcore or MLG settings for Halo Reach. Because Master Chief Collection is coming out soon on PC, and these will be in the hardcore playlist in matchmaking, I wanted to go ahead and show players who either haven't ever played any Halo game at all, or not played Halo Reach, or come from other games like Counter-Strike, for example, and want to learn about playing Master Chief Collection Halo Reach competitively. These settings are much different than the vanilla or default settings, and I'll touch on some of that later. So know that some of these things I'm talking about only apply to the MLG settings, which I'm going to call them from now on. Competitive, hardcore, and MLG all mean the same thing in this context. And some of these things will only touch on the MLG settings and not apply to the vanilla game. Additionally, there's more specifics in depth on like maps and strategies and game types that I can talk about later, as well as like callouts on maps, like where different locations are known as. I might touch on those in a later video if I'm up to it. So, a few things about Halo Reach. It is played 4v4 competitive. So the most common thing and most important thing is your starting weapon, which is the DMR. The DMR is a rifle. It shoots single shots, and it comes with 15 bullets per clip. It takes 5 shots to kill an enemy, so 4 anywhere, and 1 in the head. The last shot has to be a headshot to kill them, otherwise it takes, I think, either 7 or 8 bullets. I don't recall off the top of my head. The weapon has a scope. If you are shot at while you're in scope, it'll take you out of scope automatically without you doing anything. So really important to note. This is true, by the way, of any weapon that has a scope in Halo Reach. And that's really important when we talk about snipers later on. The most important thing for MLG that is different than vanilla is the fact that this is what's called zero bloom, meaning that shooting at full speed does not change your accuracy at all. It'll shoot in the same spot every single time. In addition to that, moving and shooting, unlike a game like Counter-Strike, for example, where moving makes you less accurate, moving and shooting in this game does not make you less accurate. So moving and shooting is usually encouraged. Because of the fact that the moving and shooting has no inaccuracy and shooting full speed has no inaccuracy, player movement, commonly you'll have people strafing like this, or potentially even jumping or crouching. And these are all very common things when you're in a firefight with somebody. Jumping and player movement is also super important. So you'll notice on a lot of Halo maps, they're designed with gaps like, say, this, where you have to jump across them. In addition to that, you may have spots like this where you can get on top of them by jumping and crouching. So that was just a normal jump, like that. And then here is a jump crouch, and that lets you get on top of certain locations, and that can be useful for different things. Let's talk about health. So players have both shields and health. So shields is sort of like games like Call of Duty have, where you have regenerating health. That's what your shields represent. You'll notice at the top you have the little health indicator. The top part is the shields, and the middle part with all the lines is the health. So here's an example. We talked about earlier how it's a 5-shot kill, 4 to the body, 1 to the head, or 4 anywhere, 1 to the head. Let's say I'm getting shot in the body like this. 4 shots will make it go warning. That'll mean I'm 1 shot. 1 shot will kill me. Let's say I get shot in the body like that. That lowers my health. So the first 4 shots only lowered my shields. It didn't lower my health at all. The last 2 shots, because they weren't in the head, which would have killed me since it was on the warning or warning with no shields, aka being 1 shot, the body shots are the only thing that will lower your health. Some other things will do more health, like a grenade might do more health than your shield. So you'll lose all your shields and some of your health. But that's the most common example. Let's say, since I have low health now, the only way to get your health back is to either die or pick up a health pack, which we'll talk about in a second. Let's say, though, I talked about earlier how you normally need your last shot on a 5-shot needs to be in the head. Let's say I've already lowered my health. That first 4 shots there, and then the last shot in the body. Because my health was already low, that's how I died. So you generally want to pick up a health pack when you are red health, if it's convenient. Your shields are the most important part because they recharge, and it takes I think 6 or 7, maybe 8 seconds. I can't honestly remember off the top of my head to regain your shields. Here's a quick example of how a health pack works. So here I've lowered my health, and I picked up a health pack. Now you notice not only did it heal my health, but it also immediately started recharging my shields. It didn't slow down at all. Like it didn't have to wait for the shields to recharge. It started recharging as soon as I pick up the health pack, which is also useful. Now, time to kill is really slow. So if we shoot someone full speed, Takes about 1.8 seconds or something like that, 1.7. It's a little less than 2 seconds, basically. Now, because kill time is so slow, team shooting, where you have multiple of your team shooting at the same enemy at the same time, is really important, because as you might imagine, if they can only kill you in 1.8 seconds and you kill them in half that time, they had no chance of killing anyone on your team. So 2v1ing people in that situation, or more importantly, let's say it's a 2v2, you want to both shoot at the same person, because if they both shoot at, let's say they're both shooting and they're shooting, one person shooting at person A, one person shooting at person B, but you are both shooting at the same person, you'll kill the first player before either of you have come close to dying, and then you can both start damaging the second person. You might even kill both of them without either of you dying, or at the very least, you'll go 2 for 1. So team shooting is super important in all situations, because the shooting at the same enemy kills them faster. So shooting is one thing, and we'll talk about the individual weapons in more depth besides the DMR in a minute, but I wanted to talk next about grenades and melees. Those are the next two most important parts of this game after shooting with the DMR, I would say. Power weapons are important too, but these are the most core parts of the game since you always have access to them. So the first thing is grenades. There's 2 types. As you can see on the top left, I have a frag grenade and a plasma grenade. You can hold 2 of each type of grenade at any time, and usually they're scattered throughout the map. You always spawn with 2 frag grenades, and the other ones usually will spawn on the map in pairs, so you'll usually be able to get a pair of plasmas or a pair of frag grenades on the ground. Frag grenades, I'm going to throw one at my own character here. They do quite a bit of damage, as you can see. That took off all my shields and some health. So frag grenades, pretty commonly you'll use them to make a player one-shot, or if they're already weak and they're running away, you can throw them around the corner to kill them. Frag grenades, what they do is when you throw them, once they hit a surface, whether it's a wall or a floor, once they hit a surface, that starts their sort of time to explode. And it takes, I think, I don't know exactly how long, maybe a second or 2. If you throw them in the air, though, they'll just go and go and go until they hit something. Then their timer will start. The second type of grenade is plasma grenades, also known as sticky grenades. So here's an example of how you can use sticky grenades. So let's say I throw it on the ground. It can actually kill a player in one hit. So a plasma grenade is really powerful. Now, the other thing that plasmas can do, so you can throw them on the ground, but they're a little easy to dodge, because if you jump, you can usually, not always, but you can usually avoid them by jumping or just by moving far enough away. However, you can also stick a player with a sticky grenade, and that will also kill them in one hit, which is really important. Now, generally, you're not going to go for sticks that often, but there's some situations where you will intentionally try to stick somebody to get a quicker kill. When you're in a firefight with someone, just like in games like Counter-Strike, throwing a grenade is less important than shooting if you're in a direct engagement. There are some situations where if their shot is really bad or you have a really good strafe, you can throw a grenade, strafe around a little bit, jump or whatever, dodge all their things, and then hit them. But even then, it's usually worth it to just shoot instead, because if the grenade misses them, or if you throw it past them by mistake, it's really easy to not get any damage on them at all. Generally speaking, grenades are used in a couple situations. Number one is you're either anticipating a person walking a certain way, so that could be a choke point commonly used like this. You'll throw it and kind of use it to have them walk into it, or maybe a person's running this way and you're throwing a grenade after them. That's common. Another one would be if there's a situation where like there was someone hiding in a corner. So like let's say there was a one-shot player in this little cubby. I could throw a grenade like this, and that would be the splash damage. So killing hiding players without chasing them is useful. The last one would be if you're like running away and you're the weak person, you can sometimes throw a grenade behind you like this and trick the person into standing on it, or something similar to that. So you can use it to hold off areas, even if they don't necessarily chase you. Maybe you're fighting like this, and then you throw a grenade like this to avoid them from pushing you, and you keep throwing them until let your shield. That's another common tactic. So that's grenades. Next, we'll talk about melees. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually heal my hit points first. So melees, there's basically 2 types of melees. Technically there's 3, but the last one is not really used. So the first 2 types of melees, the first one is just a normal melee. This means you're meleeing a person anywhere except their back. So when you melee a player, I'll show you how much damage it does approximately. It does that much. So all your shields and some of your health. Now, this means that, as you might notice, I've got the little warning noise, or warning, on the top there as well. That means I'm no shields or one shot. So that means that if you get meleeed, anyone can shoot you once in the head afterwards, and you'll die. So meleeing someone and then shooting them in the head once, pretty common way to kill them. Similarly, if someone is one shot and you melee them, they'll also die. So if you've already meleeed them once, you can melee them a second time, or two players can melee the same person, one after the other, and it'll kill them. The third and least common, well, not even least common, the least necessarily intuitive is shooting someone and then meleeing them. The reason why is, let's say you're in a situation like this, and you shoot them twice, and then melee them, that actually only puts them to 1 health. So unless they've already taken damage previously and they have low health, the 2 shot and 1 melee will not kill them if you do it like that. So that means that you instead would need to do a 3 shot and then a melee. So I'll show that off right now. This means that your 2 most common go-tos would be, you either want to melee them and then try to shoot them in the head, or you want to shoot them 3 times first and then melee them. So sometimes you'll be in a situation where you're both shooting each other, but you're running straight for each other. The person, sometimes you'll find in matchmaking, people will shoot you twice, and then you're close enough to melee, so they just melee you. That basically, the first 2 shots did no damage. Not technically, because they literally did health damage, but because your health is way less important than your shields, it's effectively the same as if you just meleeed them with the never shooting them once. So always go for the 3rd shot, even if it seems like they're going to melee you first. If you're both full health at the beginning, you generally just want to do it that way. This type of melee, where you just melee someone like this twice, that is known as a pummel, but technically, that's technically how people call it, but it's really, a lot of people call that a beatdown, because in the older versions of Halo, that's what they call it. The second type of melee is technically known as a beatdown, but most people call it an assassination. Some people also call it like a back whack or a back smack. So that's when, as you might imagine, you melee the person in the back. That's a one-hit kill. Anywhere that you kill them, melee them in the back like that, it always will do a one-hit kill no matter how much shields or health they have. Obviously, you have to hit them in the back. Sometimes it's a little finicky, and you'll hit them what you think is the back, and it's technically the side, and it'll just do a normal melee. Now, I did mention that there's technically a 3rd type of melee, and that is basically the same as the second one, only there's more to it. So basically, if you just tap them or just hit the melee button once, you'll do a back whacker or a beatdown. Most people call it assassination. However, if you hold the button down, it does this long and drawn out animation. When you're doing that animation, it doesn't kill them instantly, and you can actually be killed during it. So 99% of the time, you would never want to do that. The only time you would do it is to embarrass someone, basically. And generally, you wouldn't want to ever do that in MLG settings, because you risk just dying and not killing the guy. So pretty much you never would use that. So let's go ahead and run through the other weapons really quickly. We'll talk about the sort of the non-power weapon, sort of sidearm style weapons first. The first one is the needle rifle. It also has a scope, just like the battle rifle, or DMR rather, and it takes 6 shots to kill. Last shot having to be a headshot. With the needle rifle, it basically does less damage up front, so for the most part, you would prefer to use the DMR over it because it does more damage per shot. Even though the needle rifle shoots slightly faster, but it is basically a sidearm. You would pick it up to use sort of like you would use a pistol or something like that as a sidearm in other games, and I usually pick it up if I'm near one. I don't go out of my way for them, though. Next thing would be the plasma pistol. The plasma pistol is a weapon that you normally would use in close range combat or mid-range combat. When you charge it up and hold it like this, it'll drain the ammo, but if you let go, it'll home onto a person, it'll track them, and then when it hits them, it'll put them one shot. And it also takes off some of their health. You can also sort of spam shoot it like this, although it doesn't actually do that much damage to health. It actually mostly does damage to shield. So if they're full health, that actually is a lot slower than just doing the other method and shooting them in the head with the DMR afterwards. That can also, if in game types where there is an overshield, which technically this one does not have an overshield, talk about that later, that can also kill an overshield from full health, so that's useful for vanilla game types. Next one, we want to talk about the 3 power weapons. So worth noting, I didn't really talk about this, when you have no weapons in your hand and you just pick up a weapon, you can hold up to 2 weapons at a time. So at first you'll just have the DMR, and then you pick up a second weapon. The switch weapon button switches between them. Then if you want to pick up a new weapon, you have to swap it. It'll swap for whatever weapon you're holding. So generally, you always want to hold on to your DMR in 95% of circumstances. Maybe occasionally you'll have 2 power weapons. but most of the time you have your DMR and then whatever the other weapon you have is. When you're switching weapons, you cannot just drop a weapon. So let's say I did have 2 power weapons at the same time, I can't actually drop them to my teammate without being near another random weapon and picking that one up and dropping it for them that way without dying. If you die, you drop both your weapons. So the power weapons. So we'll talk about the sniper and the rocket launcher first. So the sniper rifle is very similar to a scout in Counter-Strike, but it's a lot more accurate because of the hitboxes are a little easier to hit, and auto aim on a controller, aim magnetism. So it has a scope. It actually has 2 levels of scope, similar to a DMR. It does, but it zooms farther on the first one and then even farther on the second. 99% of the time you're just going to single scope, but very rarely you will double scope. Just like with the DMR, if you are scoped and then you get shot at, it'll unscope you. That's why you generally only single scope. So the sniper does 2 body shots will kill someone, like that, or 1 headshot will. You can also no scope, but it's a lot less accurate. It doesn't have the aim magnetism on controller. It's actually about as easy to no scope as it is to DMR on keyboard and mouse, because there is no aim magnetism at all, and it's perfectly accurate while unscoped. It's just that normally the aim magnetism is not there on a controller, so that's how it's balanced. So that's the sniper. As I mentioned earlier, it is a one-shot kill on the head. I missed the first shot. The rockets, as you might have ever played Team Fortress or Quake or anything like that, you want to aim for splash damage. So you're aiming for either a ceiling, in very rare circumstances where you're below someone and the ceiling is low enough. Most of the time it's going to be either a wall or the floor. Generally, you want to aim for a wall or ceiling if you're lower than the enemy, and if you're higher than the enemy or on the same level, you want to aim for the floor or a wall. Walls are obviously the best if they're closest to them. There are also some situations, like let's say I'm standing here, some people might actually shoot this wall right here below me to splash me, rather than trying to hit, like if I'm here, I would shoot like right there to hit that edge, rather than trying to jump. Also, if you're above someone, you would generally either, if you're on the same level, you would jump and shoot them a lot of times, or if you're lower than you would peer over the edge and shoot down at them if you can. Last power weapon is the grenade launcher. It's the least powerful of the 3 power weapons. If you just shoot it normally, it will just kind of ricochet off like that and almost act like a normal grenade. It's a lot harder to control that way. So what you actually want to do is you want to hold the button down and release when you want it to detonate. And if you get really good at it, you can time it to where you can instant kill people. It's a one-hit kill if you get the grenade to explode right on them. It's more powerful than a regular grenade. So last 2 things are power-ups and armor abilities. So this is not actually part of the game. This evade, don't pay attention to it. It is in the vanilla game, but it's not in the MLG settings any longer, if I'm not mistaken. It used to be a long time ago. So the only... you do not spawn with any armor abilities. So in the vanilla game, you have like stuff like sprint or evade or jetpack or a few other ones. You don't get any of them by default. You start with nothing. However, on some maps, the jetpack is available. You can pick it up. I think you just walk over it to pick it up if you don't already have one, which you won't. So this is just a button to press whatever your armor ability button is, and that will allow you to jetpack. If you hold it in, it'll jetpack longer, and then there's a you see a little meter on the left-hand side, tells you how long you have left. This is useful for situations like this where you need to, say, get somewhere high, but you don't want to walk all the way around the walkway or the path. That's what it's used for. Not super powerful, but it is useful on some maps. And it's only available on a select couple. I think it's only 2. Maybe 3, actually. Then we want to talk about the 2 power-ups. So first one I want to talk about is active camouflage, also known as camo. Basically, it makes you sort of pseudo-invisible for a little while. You'll notice when you're running full speed, it looks like you're becoming less camouflaged, but in reality, the enemies see you the same. It is easier to see someone when they're moving, not because it becomes less camouflage like this, but simply because the movement of them going across the screen is what actually catches your eye. But technically, they're the same visibility level. So I'll show you whenever this goes away what it looks like from an enemy POV. When they first pick it up, it takes a second for them to go camo. It's worth noting on a controller, your aim magnetism no longer works, and your reticle won't turn red when an enemy is there. And as you can see them pretty clearly if you're looking right at them. And them moving also makes it a little more obvious where they are. But it is still very useful, and commonly footsteps aren't really a thing in Halo, unlike other games, so you can't really usually listen for them. Sometimes you can, but very rarely. Is that a thing? So 95% of the time, camo, you can just run it behind someone and kill them. All right, so we talked about camo. Next, we want to talk about overshield. So overshield isn't technically an overshield. Overshield in other versions of Halo, even in this version, just gives you more shields. But because the overshield in this game only gives you 2 times shields, and that isn't usually good enough, they have this power up instead. When you pick it up, it turns the character model white, as you see here, no matter what team you're on. And it takes, I believe, 9 shots to kill instead of the normal 5. Last shot does have to still be a headshot. So that's the gist of that. It's basically a damage reduction power up. So that's pretty much all of the fighting related stuff I wanted to talk about in this video. The last thing I wanted to talk about is specifically CTF oriented. And this is sort of a mechanic that isn't super obvious and new players will often struggle with, so I wanted to talk about it. So when you pick up the flag, so it's the same as picking up a weapon for the most part, hold your reload button to pick it up. When you pick it up, there will be no indication to the enemy team. It'll tell them enemy team has your flag on their screen, but it won't show them where the flag is. Now, that may sound good. You may say, oh, well, I'll just hold on to the flag and they won't know where I am. The problem with this, because there is no motion tracker or radar, that's the other thing I didn't mention at the very top. There is no radar or motion tracker in MLG settings. That's very important. It's unlike vanilla. Vanilla, you have to crouch walk and it's fucking slow and terrible. No such thing in MLG settings. Now, because you don't want to be spotted, you might think it's better to hold on to the flag. That's not the case, because look how slow you walk. It is ungodly slow. Now, let's compare it to when I don't have the flag.
Flag dropped.
It's like, I think it's like 1.5 times faster or something like that. Now, what this means is that you want to do what's known as flag running or flag juggling.
Taken.
Now, the sort of beginner way of doing it would be this. You can technically use the grenade button, but if you have grenades, you'll actually throw them. So I usually like to use the drop weapon button.
Flag drop.
That drops the flag. Then what you do is you basically will alternate between picking the flag up and dropping it while you're moving forward.
Flag drop.
Now that will get you a little bit faster. Like, this is very clearly faster than just this, right? There.
Flag dropped.
Now, this is not still the most preferred method of going. So this obviously indicates where you are because they're going to see the flag indicator when you drop it. But it's still slower than the other method. So the other method I can't really describe. Basically it involves you jumping and then grabbing the flag when you're kind of in midair and then throwing it before you start walking again. And because when you run and jump, you keep your momentum in the air, that lets you go a lot faster. So I'll show you how that works in practice. So you're like this.
Flag reset.
Oh, reset before I picked it up. So let's say I was trying to run the flag here, and I'm about
1 minute remaining. Flag taken.
You might do something like this, right?
Flag dropped.
So you see how you can kind of get the flag to go really far.
Flag dropped.
And this is something you really honestly have to practice quite a bit. But the really useful thing for this is this lets you cross some gaps that you really could not cross otherwise. So let's say you just grabbed the flag out of the enemy base and you're running it back the other way, right? You can do something like this with this method, and you can make that jump. And that was even you can do it even cleaner than that. So it's really advantageous to practice this method where you jump and then grab it in midair, so to speak. And that lets you do a lot further jumps and things like that. So that's the gist of it. Practice this particular jump in particular. It's really helpful.
10 seconds remaining.
And that will let you go a lot faster than if you had to walk up. That's all I have time for. Thank you for watching. This is like the 15th time I've recorded this, so hopefully this will be easier in the future. But thanks for watching.